Hi, this week on my podcast, I'm going to have Ashley here, and she is an expert in the financial area. I'm going to let Ashley introduce herself and how she ended up contacting me. She is certified with the NFL Players Association, which is awesome for any of you NFL players. But we're going to talk about what young people should be doing that are getting chunks of money, like college students in the NLI space, like NFL athletes who are getting a big paycheck now, like Major League Baseball players, NBA players, and just anybody who's getting chunks of money at a young age and what they can do. So welcome, Ashley. Introduce yourself to my audience.
Thanks, Jill. So my name's Ashley Wilkin. I'm a certified financial planner, along with being an NFL PA certified financial advisor. My firm is the Rice Partnership. It's a family-owned firm. My mom started it 15 years ago, and I joined 3 years ago. We have offices in California and Hawaii. So Oahu, Maui, Paso Robles, and San Luis Obispo, California. I started off my career after I got my MBA working for commercial banks. So I have a lot of experience in commercial lending, real estate analysis, ag lending, and then, came over to the wealth management side a little bit later in my career. And now, have enjoyed helping clients with managing their investments and financial planning.
Gotcha. Now, were you a student athlete as well, Ashley?
Yeah, I was on the rodeo team at Cal Poly. So not, it was it's a club sport, so a little bit different, but my husband and I still enjoy team roping, and he goes to some of the professional rodeos still. So we're still involved in competing and competition. So yeah, we know all about it.
So Ashley got a hold of me because one of my husband's former players, Bear Pasco, you're actually helping Bear, I guess. But so what is your advice to young people when it comes to their money? Because so many people, especially young people, don't realize how important it is to start investing their money.
Yeah. So the, overall arching advice is start early and start often. So, the earlier you start, you have time on your side. My mom always says the three greatest inventions are fire, the wheel, and compound interest. So the way I like to explain it is, if you're getting a 7.2% return on your investment, your money should double every 10 years. So if you start in your 20s, your money should double 3 times before you retire, if you're going to retire at 59 and a half, which is when you can start touching your retirement funds. So that's a lot of good things going if you start early. The later in life you start, obviously you have to save more of your paycheck, which can be a bigger burden.
So let's go back to you being like a college student. And, college students don't have a lot of money, but they now are getting these opportunities with, getting maybe a few deals from brands. Let's say the deal is $5,000, $10,000. If somebody gets a check, and just remember, they are struggling college students at the same time, what is your recommendation?
So if you're starting to save for retirement in your 20s, you only need to save 10 to 15%. So, it could be a couple hundred, it could be a couple $1,000s a year, but 10 to 15% is not a lot. So my advice is to just do it with every paycheck, no matter where you are in your life. Don't get used to living on 100% of any paycheck. So take your 10 to 15% off the top and put it away in some kind of savings account. The first thing to save for is your emergency funds. So, if you're in college, you might be in a different situation, but for, professional athletes that are getting paid on a regular basis, you should have, 3 to 6 months is the norm in the industry But because of, kind of the higher risk of professional athletes, we recommend 6 to 12 months of reserves. So that's 6 to 12 months of expenses. Once you have that saved, then you can start saving for retirement. So first, emergency fund, that's the first bucket to fill up. Second bucket is retirement. After that, you can start saving for, other things, kids' education, a house could, be in there too, somewhere, but it just depends on the situation.
And then the good thing about investing in retirement is that would be then deducted if it's an IRA. If it's a Roth, it's not deducted from the income. So what's your opinion on that? Do you do a Roth, or do you do, like, if you're young, do you do a Roth or do you do an IRA?
So a Roth is an IRA. Well, Roth can be an IRA or a 401k. So
Okay.
a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA are both, you can contribute to 6,000 per type. So you can only do 6,000 per year. It could be either a Roth or a traditional. It depends on the person. The benefit with a Roth is you pay tax now, and then it grows tax-free forever.
Mhm.
So, you never have to pay tax on it again. It grows, exponentially, tax-free. A traditional IRA, you get the tax deduction now, and you have to pay tax later. So a Roth is good for someone that's in a low income tax bracket now and expects to make more money down the line. So for a college kid making, $20,000 to $50,000, they're in a relatively low tax bracket. They would be a good candidate for a Roth because they can contribute now while they're in a low tax bracket and then take the money out later when they could potentially be in a higher tax bracket, especially if they go on to the professional ranks. A traditional IRA is better for someone that needs the tax deduction today because they're in a high tax bracket. There's also phase out limits. So a lot of professional athletes aren't eligible to contribute to either IRA because they make too much money. Right. So a traditional IRA phases out at 65,000 for a single person, and a Roth phases out at 124,000 for a single person.
So yeah, so that would be, so a Roth is good for these younger people.
Very good for young people. Yes, a Roth is, and also, the NFL offers a Roth general. We don't know if taxes are going to go up or down in the future. Maybe some people think that they know that, and that's awesome for them. But for a lot of people, we just hedge our bet. So if you're putting in 10% into your 401k, and I do this personally, I put in half into a Roth and half into a traditional. So then when I get to retirement age, I can figure out what bucket is better to pull out at that option because I have both available.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, that's a smart way to do it. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, like, I know you have an interesting family history of how you guys got into the financial industry, because this is the part when she called me, I didn't know. And then I realized I knew her uncle.
Yeah. So my family are cattle ranchers in Hawaii, and we have a ranch that's been in our family for over 100 years. But my mom grew up, in her eyes, she was a poor rancher's daughter, and she wanted to figure out how money worked. So she went to college and tried to learn as much about money as she possibly could, and then started working for a trust company at a bank. And that's how she got into finance and kind of out of the ranching part. And I, have been lucky enough to, join her company. But yeah, so long history of ag, and that's why I wanted to study ag at Cal Poly, is because my family's involvement in agriculture.
Yeah, well, it's really, yeah, it's interesting because the ag business, yeah, you have all these cows, but if one bad year can really mess you up, right?
Right. Yeah. The ag industry is totally different than, the professional athlete problem. In the ag industry, most of my clients are, land rich, cash poor sometimes, or you have a lot of assets and you need to figure out, a lot of clients that are in the ag industry, we're trying to figure out how to pay estate taxes and things like that from generation to generation. Professional athletes have the opposite problem, right? They have cash flow and they need to figure out how to turn that into long-term generational wealth. So
yeah, I always tell my clients, by the way, if you really only get to play for 3 years, which is the average, you need to, each year you need to figure out, okay, that's going to pay for the next 10 years. And then the second year will play for another 10 years. And the third year will play for another 10 years. So then you got 30 years worth of income if they do it right. But
yeah,
you have to save a lot of their income to do that, and then put away as much as they can. And then they do get a pension. I mean, the NFL players get a pension, but they don't get that till what, 50?
59 and a half is the first time you can touch any of your retirement benefits. So yeah, the NFL players have a lot of retirement benefits, which is awesome. But like you mentioned, if they're retiring at 30 and they can't touch that till they're, 60, they have to fund those 30 years with what I call taxable money. So money that's not in a retirement account. So it is important to save a lot of your, their, if they can, they should be saving probably like 50 or more % of their income into a taxable account to, help them for the next 30 years until they can touch that retirement. Another option is to supplement that savings with, a secondary career. I know a lot of, players that go on to coach and do different things to kind of supplement that savings as well. But, it's always good to rely on your savings. So if you can't find a job, you have something to fall back on.
Yeah, it's always a big transition, I feel like, for players when football's over and they're trying to figure out what they can do next. Now, some of them have planned for their second career the whole time, but the cash flow is not as much. That's the problem. And they're used to a certain lifestyle. If they're living the lifestyle they can afford rather than living the lifestyle that they
think they can afford.
Which are two different issues. But at 59 and a half, what does a player get? What is their retirement?
Yeah, so they have multiple streams of retirement income. They have a 401k plan, they have the pension, and they have a capital appreciation plan, which is similar to a 401k that the NFL puts money in for them. So they have usually at least three sources of income on the retirement side. So, most of the time, once they reach 59 and a half, they'll probably be fine. It's really that gap period that, is the most challenging to finance.
Yeah. Well, what they really need to do is save their money and then also plan for a second career while they're playing. If they can. I mean, it's time consuming too. I mean, being a pro athlete is more than a full-time job. And
and that brings me to another good point I wanted to bring up, especially for these younger college athletes, I don't think it's ever too early to hire a professional team, and not to, put an ad out for our firms like ours, but definitely start with hiring a CPA, someone that can help you with your taxes. You might think that you're going to save a couple $100 by doing it yourself. But in my experience, the couple $100 that you pay a CPA, you're going to save thousands back in, taxes. And also hire a financial advisor, because you don't have time to go out and research individual stocks and trade in your account and do those kinds of things. So, the couple $100 or, thousands of dollars that you're paying your advisors is going to come back, to help you in the long run, and gives you peace of mind and allows you to go and do those other things that, take up the majority of your time doing your passion. So that's kind of the first thing that I would do. Besides just saving your money, it's good to save your money, but it's good to have it invested in a way that's going to build over the long term, right?
Yeah. What realistically do you think people can expect on a return on their investment right now? I know the market's good right now, but in a good time or a bad time, what is a good return?
Yeah. So, for clients that come in with cash and just say, I want to have a conservative growth portfolio, which to us right now is actually more of a moderately aggressive portfolio because bonds aren't returning anything right now. I don't know, how much you watch the interest rates, but bonds are not returning anything. They're pretty much flat. So, we want to have the majority of a client's assets in equities if they're comfortable with that risk profile. So right now our what we call our signature allocation is closer to a 70-30% allocation versus the traditional balanced portfolio would be 60% equities, 40% bonds. So we're a little bit more aggressive on the equity side. That being said, for that type of portfolio, we think clients can expect 6 to 7% return over the long term. So this year, the market's been great and clients are getting, double-digit returns. But I always remind them, it's an average return that we're looking at. So if you get, if you're getting 15% this year, you might only get, 3 or 4% next year. It's going to probably average out to 6 or 7%, on an annual basis. But year to year, it's going to be volatile.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how does somebody get a hold of you?
They can go to our website, thericepartnership.com, and they have all our contact information is there.
Okay. So is there anything else you want to share really with anybody, not just college students, pro athletes, just that we haven't talked about?
The final thing I would, encourage anyone to do is work on your estate plan. A lot of people think, I don't have to work on an estate plan until I'm older or maybe until I have more assets. But really, everyone should have an estate plan, everyone. And a basic estate plan, you're going to have a will, you're going to have a power of attorney, and you're going to have a medical directive. And then, when you get married and have kids, then you should consider a trust. And there's lots of benefits to having a trust. But the main thing we are looking for here is you want control of your assets and control over yourself. The medical directive, tells the hospital who can make medical decisions on your behalf if something happens to you. So it's not just financial. It all ties back into your financial well-being, but that's one thing that I think a lot of people, especially young people, don't do soon enough.
Yeah. There's a lot of people. I'm amazed. I'll hear, oh, they didn't have anything. They didn't have a will, and somebody passes away at a younger age, let's say 40, 50, whatever. And maybe the money ends up going to somebody you didn't want it to go to.
Exactly. If you die without a will, the state has one for you. So, some clients, I've had very wealthy clients die without a will or a trust, and they were aware of what the state's plans were. Basically, the state's going to take 50% of your estate if you have a large enough estate, and then distribute it among your relatives based on, what relatives you have remaining. But because of my mom's background in the trust department, this is something that we specialize in, is helping clients with estate planning. And it's just, the last thing that you want to do when someone dies or is in, a hospital and needs care is to worry about, who's in charge of what and who's getting what, because that only leads to family drama. So we can do a little bit of planning beforehand. It's going to be good for you, the client, and your family in the long run.
Yeah. Family drama. Yeah. There's always, if there's money, there could be a fight, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Even if there's no money, there's still fights. So it's good to have it set up.
Yeah. Have it set up. Well, I appreciate you being on my podcast. I want to talk a little bit about some things I have going on this month. Anybody who follows me, they can still get a hold of my free class on how to represent college athletes in the NIL space. I also will be offering a workshop in October on exactly how, once you do get a client in the NIL space, what do you need to do? In addition, any student athletes who are wanting to maybe represent themselves, I can also tell you really how to get started with that, what to do, and what to also be careful about, because there's certain problems with brand deals too that people need to pay attention to. So if you want to get a hold of me, my cell is 559-250-0151. If you want to sign up for my free class, it will still be on Evergreen this month. You can get it in my IG bio, and you can also sign up for my workshop on how to get started with clients that you represent in the NIL space, or if you're a student athlete, what you need to do to get started. So thanks for being on my show, Ashley.
Thanks for having me, Jill. I appreciate it. It was fun.